Ben Carter's thumb trembled against his cracked iPhone screen. $800 per day. The numbers blazed like salvation in his darkened kitchen. $47 remained in his wallet. Lucas's sneakers gaped at the toes, held together by duct tape and desperation. The red-stamped electric bill lay crumpled beside yesterday's coffee, a paper monument to his failures. Without hesitation, he pressed accept. Cedar Falls awakened in pewter shadows as an obsidian sedan materialized outside his grandmother's weathered cottage. She emerged wrapped in mystery, designer sunglasses concealing storms, cashmere coat whispering wealth with every movement. Her voice sliced through morning's silence, cultured silk around broken glass. Memorial Hospital. Every day. 2 weeks. But those weren't the words that would haunt him. Months later, in that sterile hospital corridor, she would speak 3 words that shattered his understanding of love, loss, and second chances. "I'm falling in love with you." 3 words revealing a truth more devastating than any lie she'd ever told. 3 years ago, Ben Carter had owned a corner office at TechFlow Corp., a 3-story house in Highland Park, and a BMW that purred like a satisfied cat. Then Amanda got sick. Stage 4 ovarian cancer, the doctor had said, his voice carrying death wrapped in medical terminology. 18 months of chemotherapy, experimental treatments, desperate flights to specialists who spoke in percentages and cautious optimism. Ben sold everything: house, car, retirement fund, even Amanda's engagement ring. None of it mattered. Amanda died on a Tuesday morning in March, leaving behind medical debt that would have choked a smaller man and a 5-year-old boy who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Now Lucas sat at their kitchen table, methodically eating cereal from a chipped bowl. His sneakers lay by the door like defeated soldiers, souls separating from canvas in hungry grins. Ben watched his son's careful movements, the way he made each spoonful last, and felt something crack deeper in his chest. Lucas had learned not to ask for things. 8-year-olds shouldn't possess that kind of resigned wisdom. The mathematics of poverty were brutally simple in their small wooden house. There was never enough, would never be enough, could never be enough. Mrs. Rodriguez knocked at exactly 6 a.m., her weathered hands carrying coffee and maternal concern. "Mijo, you look terrible," she said, but took Lucas anyway. The elderly neighbor had become their unofficial safety net, watching Lucas during Ben's increasingly chaotic work schedule. She never asked for payment, only occasionally accepting grocery store bouquets when Ben's pride allowed small gestures of gratitude. Her kindness was a lifeline he couldn't afford to lose. The sedan waited like a predator carved from midnight and German engineering. Ben approached cautiously, noting tinted windows that absorbed light rather than reflected it. His Honda Accord sat in the driveway, rust-spotted and apologetic, but today he would drive something that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The woman who emerged from the mansion moved with liquid grace, her perfume filling the car with something French and expensive that made Ben acutely aware of his thrift store flannel. "Good morning," she said, accent unplaceable but refined in ways that spoke of expensive private schools. "I'm Catherine." The sunglasses remained firmly in place despite grey morning light filtering through the windshield. Ben caught glimpses of pale skin, sharp cheekbones, lips pressed thin with what might have been pain or determination. She moved like someone accustomed to being driven, to having doors opened and needs anticipated without being voiced. Memorial Hospital rose from the Texas landscape like a concrete monument to human suffering and stubborn hope. Ben had spent too many hours in similar buildings, watching Amanda fade one treatment at a time. The smell hit him as Catherine opened the car door, antiseptic and desperation, the unique perfume of places where people came to fight death and usually lost. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as memories threatened to overwhelm present circumstances. "I'll be about an hour," Catherine said, then paused. "Perhaps longer. I'll text you." Ben watched her disappear through sliding glass doors, noting purposeful but hesitant movement, like someone approaching a battlefield they'd already lost once before. He settled into the driver's seat and tried not to think about the last time he'd sat in a hospital parking lot, waiting for news that never came in forms he could bear to hear. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Running late. Another 30 minutes. Sorry." The apology seemed genuine, lacking entitled impatience he'd expected from someone who could afford $800 daily for personal transportation. Ben used the time to study the hospital's facade, wondering what brought someone like Catherine to this place every single day. The building held secrets in its glass and steel, stories of hope and devastation playing out behind countless windows. When Catherine finally returned, her careful composure had cracked around the edges. Designer sunglasses couldn't hide redness around her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she fastened her seatbelt. She gave an address in the warehouse district, odd choice for someone who clearly had money, and they drove in silence through Cedar Falls' morning traffic. Ben found himself stealing glances in the rearview mirror, trying to read emotions in her carefully controlled posture. The building looked abandoned from outside, brick facade weathered by decades of Texas sun and neglect. But Catherine produced a keycard and led him through secured doors into what appeared to be a private medical facility. Expensive equipment hummed behind soundproof glass, technicians in white coats moving with purposeful efficiency of people doing important, secretive work. The waiting area was designed to soothe anxious relatives. Leather chairs, foreign magazines, a water feature that bubbled hypnotically. 20 minutes passed before Catherine reappeared, looking somehow diminished. She'd removed her coat, revealing a simple black dress that emphasized her thinness. Ben found himself wondering if she was sick, if these daily visits were treatments rather than social calls. The thought made his chest tight with unwanted sympathy. He recognized the careful way she moved, like someone whose body had become unreliable. "Home?" Catherine said quietly, settling into the back seat like a bird folding broken wings. The mansion on Oak Ridge Drive sprawled behind wrought iron gates like something from movies about old Southern money. Perfectly manicured lawns stretched toward a house that had probably sheltered generations of the same family, their wealth accumulated slowly and carefully over decades. Ben felt acutely out of place as the gates swung open at Catherine's approach. The pattern established itself over the following days. 6 a.m. pickup, Memorial Hospital, mysterious medical facility. Home by 10. Catherine spoke little during these drives, answering Ben's conversational attempts with polite monosyllables that discouraged further inquiry. She tipped him in cash at each day's end, crisp $100 bills that felt foreign in his calloused hands. But small details intrigued him. Trembling hands when she thought he wasn't looking. Foreign medical journals in her purse. Careful movements of someone relearning how to inhabit their own body. On the 4th day, everything changed. Lucas's school called during their morning drive. Heating system failure. All students needed immediate pickup. Ben pulled into the hospital parking lot with his heart racing, already calculating lost wages and complicated logistics. Single parenthood was a constant juggling act where dropped balls meant hungry children and unpaid bills. "Problem?" Catherine asked, noting his agitated phone conversation with the school secretary. "My son's school closed for the day. I need to—" Ben stopped, remembering this woman was paying him $800 and probably didn't care about his childcare complications. But Catherine surprised him. "Bring him along." Her voice carried gentleness he hadn't heard before. Children shouldn't be alone. Ben found Lucas waiting in the school office, looking small and worried among administrative chaos of an emergency closure. The boy's face lit up when he saw his father, then grew curious when he noticed the expensive sedan idling in the pickup lane. "Lucas, this is Catherine," Ben said as they approached the car. "She's a client." Catherine had moved to the front passenger seat, leaving the back for Lucas. "Hello, Lucas," Catherine said, her voice warm in ways Ben hadn't heard during their previous interactions. "That's a strong name. Do you know it means light bearer?" Lucas shook his head, suddenly shy, but Ben could see his son's natural curiosity winning over initial reticence. As they drove toward the hospital, Catherine began telling Lucas about various names and their meanings, her accent becoming more pronounced as she relaxed. At the hospital, Catherine left them in the car as usual, but returned earlier than normal. Ben had been watching Lucas color in an activity book when she slid back into the passenger seat, movements more hurried than usual. "Change of plans," she said. "Somewhere else today." She directed them to a small park on Cedar Falls' outskirts, where ancient oak trees provided shade for weathered playground equipment. Lucas immediately gravitated toward the swings, and Catherine surprised Ben by following him out of the car. "Push me, Daddy!" Lucas called, and Ben obliged, watching his son's delight as the swing carried him higher. Catherine stood nearby, sunglasses finally removed, revealing eyes the color of winter sky. She was watching Lucas with an expression Ben couldn't quite read. Longing, maybe, or recognition of something precious being glimpsed from a distance. "He looks like you," Catherine observed. "Everyone says he has his mother's eyes." "She must have been beautiful." "She was." Ben's voice caught slightly. "She would have loved this. Watching him play. She always said playgrounds were where childhood lived." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lucas explore jungle gym equipment with fearless enthusiasm of youth. Catherine's presence felt different here, outside the confines of cars and scheduled destinations. They shared expensive crackers Catherine produced from her purse, sitting on a park bench while Lucas chatted about school and friends. Catherine listened with focused attention. Adults rarely gave children, asking questions that showed genuine interest in 8-year-old concerns about teachers and playground politics. Ben found himself studying her profile, noting elegant lines of her neck, the way afternoon sunlight revealed gold highlights in her dark hair. The drive back to Oak Ridge Drive felt different with Lucas in the car. Catherine asked about his favorite subjects, his friends, what he wanted to be when he grew up. Lucas, normally shy with strangers, responded with surprising openness. By the time they reached her mansion, he was describing elaborate plans for becoming either a veterinarian or a superhero, depending on which seemed more practical by high school graduation. That evening, as Ben helped Lucas with homework at their small kitchen table, his son peppered him with questions about Catherine. Where did she live? Why did she need a driver? Did she have children? Ben answered what he could while wondering the same things himself. "She smells like flowers," Lucas observed. "And she talks like the lady in the princess movie." Ben's phone buzzed as he was washing dinner dishes. A text from Catherine's number. "Thank you for today. Lucas is special." He stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "He enjoyed meeting you." Her reply came quickly. "So did I." 3 words that shouldn't have meant anything significant, but somehow felt like the beginning of something Ben wasn't prepared to name. The next morning brought unseasonably warm October weather. Catherine was waiting by her front gate, dressed more casually than usual in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "Are we ready for an adventure?" Lucas bounced in his booster seat with barely contained excitement. Catherine directed them through Cedar Falls and onto highways heading toward Dallas, then off onto smaller roads, winding through rolling hills dotted with horse farms and old homesteads. October landscape blazed with autumn colors, reds and golds that seemed to burn against brilliant blue sky. They eventually turned through a gate marked only with a discreet sign reading Sanctuary. The driveway wound through carefully maintained pastures where horses grazed peacefully in morning sunshine. Lucas pressed his face to the window, excitement reaching new heights as they approached a complex of low buildings surrounded by white rail fencing. "Welcome to my favorite place on earth," Catherine said as they parked near what appeared to be a visitor center. A woman in her 50s approached their car, weathered face breaking into genuine smile when she saw Catherine. "Belle, we weren't expecting you today." Catherine embraced the woman warmly, and Ben caught the name, Belle, filing it away as another piece of the puzzle that was his mysterious employer. "I brought some friends, Maria. This is Ben and Lucas." What followed was one of the most magical mornings of Lucas's young life. Hope Springs, Ben learned, was a sanctuary for rescued horses, animals that had been abused, neglected, or simply outlived their usefulness to previous owners. Catherine moved through the facility with easy familiarity of someone who belonged, greeting both animals and staff by name. Her entire demeanor had relaxed, careful composure giving way to something more natural. "This is Thunder," she said, leading Lucas to a massive black stallion who approached the fence with surprising gentleness. He was a racehorse, but he got hurt and couldn't run anymore. Now he teaches children how to ride. Lucas reached through the fence to stroke Thunder's velvet nose, his face glowing with wonder. Catherine produced apples from her pocket and showed Lucas how to offer them properly. "Belle started this place about 5 years ago," Maria explained to Ben as they watched Catherine and Lucas interact with various horses. "She bought the land, funded everything. These animals wouldn't be alive without her." Ben studied Catherine with new eyes. Belle. The name suited her better than Catherine somehow, carrying warmth that her more formal introduction had lacked. They spent 3 hours at the sanctuary, Lucas absorbing everything with intense focus children reserved for truly special experiences. Catherine arranged for him to have a short riding lesson on one of the gentler horses, supporting him in the saddle with hands that had clearly done this before. "You're a natural," she told Lucas as he circled the practice ring, his grin visible from across the paddock. On the drive back to Cedar Falls, Lucas chatted excitedly about horses and riding lessons and whether they could visit Hope Springs again soon. Catherine promised they could, then surprised Ben by asking if Lucas might like to learn to ride properly. "I could arrange lessons," she said, "if you're comfortable with that." It wasn't true that Hope Springs offered scholarships, and they both knew it, but Catherine's fiction allowed Ben to accept the gift without compromising his pride. As they approached Catherine's mansion, Ben realized something had shifted between them. Careful employer-employee distance had given way to something more complex. Catherine wasn't just the mysterious, wealthy woman who paid him $800 a day anymore. She was Belle, who rescued horses and shared apples with 8-year-old boys and looked at Lucas like he was precious beyond measure. That evening, Ben called his sister Jenny in Austin, needing to talk to someone about the strange turn his life had taken. Jenny listened with skeptical attention she'd always brought to his romantic decisions. "Ben, honey, you barely know this woman, and she's paying you $800 a day, which is weird enough by itself. Don't you think there's something strange about the whole situation?" The morning of their 6th day together brought the first real crisis. Ben arrived at Catherine's mansion to find the front gate locked and no one responding to his calls. He waited 20 minutes before his phone rang. Not Catherine, but a man with a crisp British accent who identified himself as Robert. "Miss Blackwood won't be requiring your services today," the voice said without preamble. "Or going forward." "I'm sorry, who is this?" "Her business manager. She's had to return to her obligations in New York, permanently." The line went dead. leaving Ben staring at his phone in confusion. Blackwood? Catherine had said her name was Catherine, but Belle seemed to fit her better, and now this Robert person was calling her something else entirely. Nothing made sense, and the dismissal felt abrupt enough to be insulting. That evening brought another surprise. Mrs. Rodriguez knocked, carrying a large envelope with Ben's name written in elegant handwriting he recognized immediately. Inside were several items that left Ben's head spinning. $800 in cash, a savings account book showing $20,000 deposited in Lucas's name for educational expenses, and a handwritten letter on heavy cream paper that smelled faintly of Catherine's perfume. Ben, the letter began, I'm sorry for leaving so abruptly. There are things about my life, my family, that make normal relationships impossible. But please know that the time I spent with you and Lucas was the most real I've felt in years. The money is for Lucas's future, not charity, but an investment in a remarkable boy who deserves every opportunity. Thank you for showing me what it means to be genuinely cared for. C. 3 days passed in strange limbo. Ben returned to his regular schedule. Morning shifts at Murphy's garage, afternoon Uber drives, weekend security work. The $800 a day had spoiled him for normal wages, making his usual income feel inadequate in ways it hadn't before Catherine's brief presence in their lives. But it wasn't the money he missed most. It was the way Catherine had looked at Lucas, the gentle questions she'd asked, the easy companionship they'd developed. On Thursday afternoon, everything changed again. Ben was underneath a Chevy pickup at Murphy's garage when his phone rang with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was another telemarketer, but something made him slide out from under the truck and take the call. Ben? The voice was weak, strained, but unmistakably Catherine's. Memorial Hospital, room 314. Ben, I need... Ben drove to Memorial Hospital with his heart racing. Room 314 was in the oncology wing, confirming his growing suspicions about Catherine's mysterious daily visits. Catherine lay in the hospital bed looking smaller and more fragile than he'd ever seen her. Elegant clothes were gone, replaced by a standard hospital gown that emphasized her thinness. Her dark hair was covered by a silk scarf, face pale except for dark circles under her eyes. My name isn't Catherine, she said, voice barely above a whisper. It's Isabella Blackwood. The name meant nothing to Ben, but the way she said it suggested he should recognize it. Isabella saw his confusion and managed a weak smile. You don't follow financial news, do you? When he shook his head, she continued, Blackwood Industries? Steel manufacturing, defense contracts, about $2 billion in annual revenue. I'm the sole heir. Isabella began talking then, words pouring out like she'd been holding them back for months. The story was complex and horrifying. A grandfather who'd fled Germany after World War II with stolen Nazi gold. A steel empire built on war profits and human suffering. Generations of family wealth accumulated through carefully concealed atrocities. I found out 6 months ago, Isabella said. Documents surfaced, survivors came forward, the whole ugly truth. She described her decision to donate the entire family fortune to Holocaust memorial funds, the board of directors' fury, her retreat to Texas to escape media firestorm and legal battles that followed her announcement. But that's not why I'm here, Isabella continued, gesturing weakly at hospital equipment surrounding her. This is ovarian cancer, stage 2, caught early, good prognosis if I stick with treatment. The same disease that killed Amanda. Yes. Isabella's voice was barely audible. The same disease that's killed dozens of women who worked in my family's factories over the years. We covered up chemical exposures, bought off inspectors, buried health studies that would have cost millions in cleanup and lawsuits. Ben felt blood drain from his face as the implications hit him. Amanda worked for a chemical company before Lucas was born. Industrial testing. Blackwood Industries subsidiary, Chemtech Solutions. Isabella was crying now, tears sliding down pale cheeks. I have the employee records, Ben. I know exactly when she was exposed and to what compounds. The room spun around Ben as full implications hit him. Amanda's cancer, Lucas's future without his mother, 3 years of grinding poverty and grief, all connected to this woman's family legacy. You knew, he said, voice hollow with shock. When you hired me, you knew who I was. I've been tracking every family affected by our company's actions. Anonymous payments, medical bills, educational funds. I've been trying to make amends for things that can't be fixed. Isabella's voice broke completely. Ben stood abruptly, visitor chair scraping against hospital floor. You think money fixes this? You think $20,000 makes up for Amanda dying? I fell in love with you, Isabella said, voice barely audible. Both of you. I know that probably sounds impossible, given everything I've just told you, but it's the only completely honest thing I can say. Ben looked at her, really looked. Without makeup, without designer clothes, without carefully maintained composure, Isabella looked young and scared and desperately ill. The monitors around her bed beeped steadily, marking time in rhythm that reminded him viscerally of Amanda's final days. Why are you telling me this now? Because the treatment isn't working as well as we hoped. Because I might not have many more chances to tell the truth. Isabella's honesty was brutal in its simplicity. And because I needed you to know that what we had, brief as it was the most real thing in my entire life. Ben felt his anger wavering, undermined by obvious sincerity in Isabella's voice and memories of her genuine warmth with Lucas. I need time, he said finally. I need to think about all this. Isabella nodded, tears still sliding down her cheeks. I understand. Ben walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. Isabella? Yes? Does Lucas know any of this? Nothing. He thinks I went back to New York. Good. He's been through enough. That evening, after Lucas was in bed, Ben sat at his kitchen table with his laptop and searched for Isabella Blackwood. What he found made him understand why she'd been hiding in Texas under an assumed name. The internet was full of stories about the Blackwood Industries scandal, Nazi gold, wartime profiteering, decades of environmental cover-ups and workplace safety violations. Isabella's decision to donate the entire family fortune had triggered massive legal battles and media attention. 3 days passed before Ben made his decision. He dropped Lucas at Mrs. Rodriguez's house on Saturday morning and drove to Memorial Hospital with his heart hammering against his ribs. Isabella was awake when he knocked, though she looked thinner than she had earlier in the week. Her face lit up when she saw him, hope and uncertainty warring in her expression. I'm angry, Ben said, settling into the visitor chair. I'm angry about the cover-ups and the chemicals and the way companies like yours treat people like Amanda as acceptable losses. I'm angry that you knew who I was and didn't tell me from the beginning. Isabella waited without speaking, letting him work through whatever he'd come to say. But I'm also grateful, not for the money, though God knows we needed it, but for Lucas. Do you know what he said when I told him you were sick? Isabella shook her head. He asked if we could visit you. His first thought was that sick people need friends. He hasn't done that since Amanda died, been willing to care about someone who might leave him. Isabella was crying again, but quietly, tears sliding down her cheeks without sound. Amanda would have liked that. Ben continued. She always said Lucas had the biggest heart of anyone she'd ever met. But I was afraid her death had broken something in him. These past few weeks, watching him with you, I saw glimpses of the boy he used to be. You gave up everything to try to make it right. That has to count for something. Ben walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where he'd waited during so many of Amanda's treatments. I can't forgive your grandfather. I can't forgive the company executives who knew about the chemical exposures and covered them up. But you're not them. Isabella's smile was radiant despite her obvious exhaustion. Does this mean you might consider forgiving me? I'm working on it, Ben said, returning to his chair. Lucas wants to see you. He's been asking every day. I'd like that. More than I can say. They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of confession and partial forgiveness settling between them like a bridge being built one careful board at a time. The next morning, Ben and Lucas drove to Memorial Hospital with a carefully rolled drawing and flowers Lucas had insisted on picking from Mrs. Rodriguez's garden. Isabella's face transformed when she saw Lucas, lighting up with genuine delight as the boy approached her bed with his gifts. What he'd created was a castle-like structure surrounded by horses, with 3 stick figures clearly meant to represent him, Ben, and Isabella standing together. That's Hope Springs, Lucas explained. And that's you and me and Daddy visiting the horses. Isabella studied the drawing with serious attention she might have given a business contract. It's perfect, Lucas. Absolutely perfect. Can I keep it? Lucas nodded eagerly. I made it special for you, to help you get better. I think it will help very much. They spent 2 hours in Isabella's hospital room, Lucas chattering about school and friends while Isabella listened with patient attention. When visiting hours ended, Lucas hugged Isabella with fierce intensity of someone who'd learned that goodbyes could be permanent. Isabella held him close, eyes bright with tears she was trying not to shed. Get better soon, Miss Catherine, Lucas whispered against her shoulder. On the drive home, Lucas was quieter than usual, processing the reality of seeing someone he cared about in a hospital bed. Daddy, he said eventually. Miss Catherine is going to be okay, right? Ben chose his words carefully. The doctors are working very hard to help her get better, but sometimes, even when everyone tries their best, people are still very sick. I think Mommy would like Miss Catherine, Lucas observed. Why do you think that, buddy? Because they both like horses, and they both make that face when they think I'm being funny, but they don't want to laugh. And because you smile different when Miss Catherine is around, like how you used to smile with Mommy. The observation hit Ben with unexpected force, reflecting Amanda's perceptiveness in features that were becoming more like hers every day. The following weeks fell into a new pattern. Ben would work his regular schedule, but every few days he and Lucas would visit Isabella at Memorial Hospital. She was responding well to treatment, though the process left her exhausted and often nauseated. On good days, she would tell Lucas stories about horses or ask him to read to her. On difficult days, she would simply hold his hand and listen to him chatter. One afternoon in late November, Isabella was well enough to leave the hospital for a short outing. Ben drove them to Hope Springs, where Lucas was reunited with Thunder and the other horses he'd missed during Isabella's hospitalization. Isabella moved slowly, still weak from treatment, but her smile was radiant as she watched Lucas feed apples to his favorite horses. This is where I want to be when I die, Isabella said quietly, standing beside Ben at the fence. Don't talk like that. It's not morbid, Ben. It's just peaceful. All these animals that have been given second chances, this place where broken things come to heal. She leaned against the fence rail. If something happens to me, will you bring Lucas here sometimes? Nothing's going to happen to you. You can't know that. Neither can I. Isabella's voice was matter-of-fact rather than sad. But I can know that these weeks with you and Lucas have been the happiest of my life. If that's all I get, it's more than many people ever have. They stood watching Lucas work with patient concentration to untangle a knot in Thunder's mane. Isabella, Ben said eventually. What you said in the hospital, about wanting to know if what we started could be something real. I think I'm ready to find out. Isabella turned to look at him, hope and uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Even knowing everything you know now? Especially knowing everything I know now. Ben reached for her hand, finding it smaller and more fragile than he remembered, but warm with life and possibility. You're not your grandfather. You're not the sins of your family or the source of their wealth. You're the woman who rescued horses and listened to an 8-year-old boy's stories and chose to give away everything to try to make amends for things you didn't do. Isabella's smile was luminous. And you're the man who raised that boy to have the biggest heart in Texas and still found room to forgive someone who probably didn't deserve it. Lucas chose that moment to run over to them, face glowing with excitement. Thunder remembered me. Maria says he's been sad since I stopped coming, but now he's happy again. Ben felt something settle into place in his chest, not desperate hope he'd carried during Amanda's illness, but something steadier and more sustainable. A sense that maybe, despite everything that had brought them to this point, they were exactly where they needed to be. That evening, after they'd returned Isabella to the hospital and Lucas had fallen asleep exhausted from his day with the horses, Ben sat at his kitchen table and thought about second chances, about the possibility of building something new from ashes of old griefs and complicated histories. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Today was perfect. Thank you for giving us a chance. Ben typed back, Thank you for being worth the chance. Then he added, We're going to figure this out, all of us together. Isabella's final response came quickly. I love you, Ben Carter. You and that remarkable boy of yours. Ben stared at the words on his screen, feeling his heart do something complicated and wonderful in his chest. I love you too, he typed back. Get some rest. Tomorrow we're going to start figuring out what comes next, because that was what love meant, in the end. Not perfect circumstances or unblemished histories, but the choice to build something together despite complications. The willingness to take risks, to trust despite past betrayals, to believe in second chances even when the foundation was uncertain. Ben turned off his phone and went to check on Lucas, finding his son sleeping peacefully with Isabella's drawing pinned to the wall beside his bed. The crayon horses seemed to glow in the nightlight's gentle illumination, a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths were the ones children understood instinctively. Love wasn't about deserving or earning or perfect timing. It was about recognition. The moment when two people looked at each other and saw not just who they were, but who they could become together. Outside, Cedar Falls settled into quiet rhythms of a small town night, but inside the little wooden house, something new was beginning.